So I don't want to keep talking about Tyler Robinson killing Charlie Kirk, but they keep lying about it. This is how fascism works. They just get all these different platforms to spread their lies until people believe the lies. And even though it's really obvious to see the other side, they will only talk about the lies. They'll only propagate the lies. This happened on NPR tonight with the guy who wrote articles profiling Charlie Kirk and had been daily text messaging Charlie Kirk and had also profiled Nick Fuentes, and they mentioned a lot that he also profiled Nick Fuentes. And why did they mention that? Because Nick Fuentes' terror cell, Nick Fuentes' branch of the Putin Trump terror network, killed Charlie Kirk in the Charlie Kirk branch of the Putin Trump terror network. And they're not telling you that news. They're telling you all the news that leads to other conclusions than that, including a lot of their lies about somebody being trans when, like, literally no one's trans in this story. And the expert that they had, the journalist that they had on NPR today, I just want to focus for a little bit on the way he presented things and how those are ultimately lies. A lot of them are ultimately lies, and how we need to counter that narrative and tell the truth about stuff. He was saying that Nick Fuentes, he's presented by NPR as the expert on both of these characters, that Nick Fuentes and Charlie Kirk only have one thing in common. He says this might be the only thing that they have in common. They agree that the enemy is the same. They don't define exactly who the enemy is, but they agree that the enemy is the same, with the exception of Nick Fuentes includes Jewish people and is open about his racism, or more vocally open about his racism, and therefore he condemns Charlie Kirk for not having been as openly vocal about his racism. And so Nick Fuentes says the things that are more obviously Klan or neo Nazi, and Charlie Kirk, alludes to those things or hints at those things. And that's, that wasn't strong enough for Nick Fuentes. That's the real difference between them. In my book, from my understanding of them and their followers from years and years of interacting with them, unfortunately, they're the same with that difference. Nick Fuentes is more openly racist and anti-Semitic, although Charlie Kirk is openly racist and not anti-Semitic. He's openly racist and Zionist, and that's the real difference. The pro-Zionist versus, I guess, anti-Zionist, but everything else they're the same about. Now, this expert was saying this is the only thing they have in common because they're so different, and they're just not. They're different twigs off the same branch of Trump and Putin's terrorist network. They're just two different terror cells. And they don't realize that. They don't present themselves that way. I think maybe the Groypers do. Nick Fuentes' terror cell. Maybe they do. But it's so obvious that that's what Tyler Robinson is. That's what his friends are, who are not at all surprised. In the actual um, email, text message exchange, or the believable text message exchange between him and his friends, when they're like, "Oh, dude, you did it," like they totally believe it, or they're not at all surprised, and they just make a joke about you shouldn't go to McDonald's because that's where the person snitched on Luigi. And they're playing that off like it. Inside Edition was reporting on that outside of a McDonald's, playing it off like he's just copycatting Luigi, that's the main influence, Luigi, when it's obviously not. Again, trying to distract from the Groyper, from Nick Fuentes, from being a Groyper. Now, this expert on NPR referenced this because they played extensively Nick Fuentes, you know, tribute to Charlie Kirk. And then the expert mentioned that it's not just a saving face in social media because of their feud or their rivalry, but it's a legal defense. It's Nick Fuentes trying to get ahead of a legal case that's trying to pin the murder on him. And then refers to the fact that a few people, trying to minimize this idea, that a few people online are suggesting that he's a Groyper. And that part of their evidence for that is that all of the phrases he inscribed are used by the Groyper community. But then this journalist then tries to downplay that by saying, but this is really just because he's a gamer. Because he's a gamer, he says he's. BS. That's looking bad on all gamers, which is like, I don't know, half of us in America. That's making us all look bad, as if we all go run around saying, notice his bulges. Ooh, ooh. We don't. As if we all go around saying, if you see that, if you read this, you're gay. LMAO. That's not us. That's not gamer culture. That's incel culture, incel libertarian culture. It's Groyper culture. It's these red pill and black pill manosphere culture. It's incel stuff, incel libertarian stuff. It's terrorist stuff. We've been calling it out for years. And this guy's supposed to be a reporter, but he's going to have to, you know, kind of tease that explanation, kind of allude to a little bit that explanation of things that he's a groyper, but then hard left to the, out of that, hard turn to get out of that explanation. Just like Adam Mockler read all the supposed text between Tyler Robinson and his supposed trans roommate, which are not at all believable. But Adam Mockler jumped right on it after saying, I said days ago that we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions here, but I'm going to jump to a conclusion as soon as I get what Kash Patel says they texted each other, which is completely unbelievable and gives what like ridiculous credit to the FBI in the middle of it for some reason, has the greatest concern for his granddad's gun, and won't commit to any actual like romantic talk, because if once it's discovered that Kash Patel really wrote it, he doesn't want to, have it be revealed what his gay fantasies of romantic, talk or romantic talk with a trans girl would be. Anyway, um, it's ridiculous how unbelievable that is. But Adam Mockler's ready to jump to a conclusion that this proves he's not a groyper. So from every angle, they're trying to make him not a groyper when he totally is. And that will, I mean, I won't say that it'll ultimately come out. I mean, the truth does ultimately come out. But how ultimately will that have to be if they saturate all the media with this counter argument? So I think it's really important to point this out. I think it's really important to focus on how even this journalist for NPR was making all these excuses. He's, admitting that Nick Fuentes is a, Holocaust denier, Nazi, all this other stuff. But he's still just kind of downplaying what the significance of that is. And he's certainly downplaying how dangerous Charlie Kirk is by saying, you know, uh, even playing Nick Fuentes' tribute to Charlie Kirk, saying in full, it seemed like, saying how great he was and how he could never fill his shoes, and just all this praise, which again is, if that's the main way people are introduced to Nick Fuentes, then he sounds like as big a Charlie Kirk fan as they are. Anyway, point being, nobody should be a Charlie Kirk fan. If you are, you've just been misled. Like, he's a really bad person, and has done really bad things and represents really bad things, and they all do. But the whole Putin network of this terrorist network is to have every branch, every different variation that is susceptible to their lies and hate mongering, including the flat earth, the manosphere, all these different groups. And it's not just like they're fighting for, supremacy or something within their network. They're just activated against each other in different ways. And ultimately, Netanyahu and his genocide is part of this network. And they're now shifting to being activated against Netanyahu. They've used Netanyahu to do one genocide, and now they'll turn back, because people always wonder, well, why would Klansmen and Nazis, be Zionists as well, working with Zionists? Of course, the more you know about that, the more you know that's not strange at all. But they're also using them, and again, you use one group to attack another group, and then you blame your common enemy for it, and then keep attacking yourselves, basically blaming the common enemy. So anyway, that journalist did say that the one thing they agree on is the common enemy, except Nick Fuentes includes the Jews. It's the same thing. It's Klan without the anti-Semitism for the people you can bring into that, and it's Klan with this anti-Semitism for people that are into that for the Nick Fuentes side, versus the Charlie Kirk side, Klan without the anti-Semitism. But you see Candace Owens calling out Charlie Kirk betraying Israel, or betraying Netanyahu, betraying Zionism, as part of the reason why he was at least threatened. And when you see how much Trump had prepared and how much Trump is gaining off of this murder, and when you see how much Netanyahu had prepared, how much Netanyahu is gaining off of this murder, it does seem to become pretty clear that they're responsible, or they're capitalizing on it in ways that show a lot of foreknowledge or planning for this time. Again, they're all different branches of the same terrorist network, so it's just up to Putin to activate one or the other. They attack themselves and then blame the victims, blame vulnerable populations in order to get everyone to attack them. Does it sound familiar with Netanyahu? Does it sound familiar with some other things in America? Well, we need to stop this pattern and call it out and see just the way they do it over and over again, attacking themselves, blaming us, and then even playing a role to play the narrative. I guess maybe we'll find out if they talk to Tyler Robinson's other friends that he was texting about this stuff, whether or not he's a groyper or not. Or maybe they'll get them all to agree that they're all trans all of a sudden. But point being, they'll lie if they'll do all this terrible trolling for 7 or 10 years, however long he's been a groyper, and do these murders and things. They'll lie as well. So when fascism is afoot, which it is, we need to always suspect fascism and always root out fascism to the root and find out who's behind it. And in this case, to the root means to Putin and Trump. Like, they're always behind this stuff. And Netanyahu too. Netanyahu's not behind it as much as Putin's behind it, because Putin's orchestrating and using Netanyahu and Trump, destroying their respective countries to his advantage. And then when the time comes, they'll turn one group on the next, or turn one group of supporters on the other leader, or whatever it takes to dismantle everything. But they're trying to take us down in all of this, the people, and we just need to unite against them, and we can stop them and just call out the truth about stuff. And that includes calling out our media outlets, content creators, everybody who's perpetuating their lies. Because if they're blaming trans people, they're lying. Like, basically comes down to that. They're setting it up and lying, and there aren't any trans people involved. So that's how you know who the liars are. They're trying to make the litmus test or the cutoff. If you don't praise and worship Charlie Kirk, then they want to do everything bad to you. Well, instead, it needs to be, if y'all are talking if you're talking good about Charlie Kirk and you're talking bad about trans people, that's how we know that you're part of Trump and Putin, the Trump Putineer terrorist network. We need to shut that down. Thanks.